All right, on this episode of the Armchair Coaching Podcast, we have our first one-on-one interview. All right, so welcome back to the Armchair Coaching Podcast, and today we're going to do something different, and we're going to have our first one-on-one interview, and today we're going to have our interview with Coach Dustin Mills. So to introduce Coach Mills, I'm going to read this little bio real quick. Coach Mills recently became the head coach of James M. Bennett High School in December of 2019. That's in Salisbury, Maryland, correct?
Yes, sir.
Prior to that, he was the offensive coordinator for the Clippers for 4 years and offensive line coach for 6 years. He helped guide an offense that created multiple first-team all-Bayside players, 2 city championships, 2 playoff appearances, and 1 playoff victory, the school's first in over 2 decades. Prior to that, Coach Mills was the JV head coach for the Clippers. On top of coaching football, Coach Mills has coached multiple other sports, including varsity and JV boys basketball, JV girls basketball, and JV softball. Coach Mills also teaches U.S. government at James M. Bennett High School and is the founder of Anchor Down Leadership, LLC, a leadership consulting group. You're very accomplished, Coach. That's what I'm going to say. You're very accomplished, and thank you. I'm honored to have you on as our first one-on-one interview.
It's my pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm honored to be the first of what I know is going to be a lot more. So maybe one day we can look back and say, look how bad that first interview was when you're turning out some really great ones later on with some better guests than me.
Hey, man, I keep telling the other guys who are usually on our program profiles that I have no delusions of grandeur. I started this podcast because I was bored.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm being serious. That's what happened. So today I actually was on Spotify and I did find your Anchor Down Leadership podcast. And I did listen to a couple of episodes. And so our first question today for you, you are also a podcaster. Could you take a few moments to give the listeners a quick description of what your podcast is all about?
Yeah. So, my podcast kind of spurns out of, what you talked about in the introduction with Anchor Down Leadership. And we could talk about what all that is later on. But essentially, it's a podcast focused on leadership education and leadership development, something which I think is sorely lacking in a lot of spaces in the current world. And, really, it's just a collection of things that I've learned over the years. I've been fortunate to have some great, great leaders and teachers to look up to, and I've learned a lot from them. And, I've also had some poor leaders and poor teachers, and I've learned a lot from them as well. And it's kind of a collection of my ideas and the ideas of others that I've kind of put into one place that, hopefully can help somebody if they're listening, if they're, in their own career, in their own path, and it's right now it's kind of focused, I would say, mostly at athletic coaches because it's just kind of the setup right now. But the goal is long-term to develop it and make it more into just general leadership, whether you're in the workspace, an educational leader, or whatever it might be. But yeah, so we're on just recorded my 3rd episode this morning. So that'll be out later this week. But it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy the experience.
Yeah. And I've been doing a lot of research into leadership recently. And the books that I've been really getting into are The Culture Defeats Strategy. And your podcast kind of resonates with that, at least from what I've seen so far, especially your 2nd episode where you were talking about you have to find your core values, like figure out what your core values are. And it resonated with me because I'm an assistant coach. I'm not a head coach. And you said in your podcast that, yes, this even applies to assistant coaches as well.
Sure.
And that really resonated with me because I've really taken into heart that I need to start being more, as an assistant coach, I need to be more active in the leadership role. And not necessarily, I don't necessarily have to be that rah, head coach guy trying to get them motivated every day, but I can be the support guy in the background. I can definitely, make sure the kids understand the different leadership roles and all that kind of stuff. So moving on to the next thing, I'm always fascinated by everyone has a story, right? Every coach has a story. Could you tell us your coaching story? Basically, could you tell us how did you end up where you are now?
So I'm going to preface this with this. This is a little bit long-winded, just because it's kind of the nature of the journey, so to speak, right? To back up and understand, I grew up in a military family. We moved all over the world. I was born in Indiana, and I graduated high school in Indiana. And between those two time frames, we lived in multiple states, multiple countries. My first 2 years of playing high school football were actually for an American high school in Europe. So we traveled to other countries to play other American military bases, and that was an awesome experience. Moved back to Indiana and graduate. I played 4 years of high school football. I did not play college football. I was an average high school football player at best. And I kind of understood that. Plus, I graduated in 2002 before there was all these recruiting sites and before Huddle and before, all these different things that you could do. And recruiting was largely just, very hyper regional. So there was not really any opportunity for me to play the next level. And I was fine with that. I went to Purdue University in Northern Indiana for a year. In the meantime, my father retired from the Navy and, he got stationed in Maryland and right outside DC in Montgomery County. So I came out here for the summer and ended up staying. And I went to community college. And there I met my best friend who was like, "Hey, what are you doing after community college?" And I was that kid. I had no idea. I was ready to be done with school. I wanted to get in the workforce. I'd had enough. So he's like, "Well, come down and look at Salisbury University." So I drove down and looked at it with him. I was like, "This is where I want to go." I actually took a semester off and worked because I was like, you know what? I don't know if I want to keep going with school. Let me save some money. And taking that semester off and working was the best decision I ever made because I realized how much working part-time or, working retail full-time, it was miserable for me. It was absolutely miserable. I was like, I got to get back to college, man. So ended up coming down to Salisbury University in 2005. I've been here ever since. I did not graduate with a teaching degree, graduated just a history degree. And I actually worked in politics for 2 years, culminating in a run for office myself. That's another lifetime and another story. But again, I don't know. I'm glad I did that, but I'm also glad I don't do that anymore. And during that time, I was like, I need to do something else in my life. This is not a long-term plan. And I had always loved football. I cherished all those memories I had of playing high school football. And I thought to myself, maybe I'd like to get into coaching. So a classmate of mine played slow pitch softball with the head coach at Bennett. And she's like, "Hey, I know him. Do you want me to give you his information?" I was like, "Sure." So I sent him a text, or I might've sent him an email. I don't know. I was a young college kid. I wasn't texting people at that time. He's like, "Yeah, come on board. We'd love to have you." So I started as a JV defensive coordinator in 2007. And originally was just going to be a volunteer coach, and the other paid JV coach said, "Hey, I can't make the commitment." So I became paid 2 days into my coaching career. So I was very, very fortunate in that regard. Granted, it was, again, a JV assistant position, but you know what? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right? I've been fortunate to be with the program ever since, just kind of working my way up. I've had some other opportunities, trying to, look at relocating to different places, but it kept working out that I just kept staying at Bennett. And, here I stand in 2020 as the head football coach, and it's a position I'm extremely honored to have. I'm extremely humbled to have because we've had, in the last 39 years, we've had 2 head football coaches. So I'm the third. So I got some big shoes to fill, because they've both been great men. And, I'm ready for the challenge, and I'm excited for the challenge, to be quite honest.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. I mean, the fact that you stayed at one school, that's pretty awesome. I'll admit I've been at 3 schools already. I'm assuming I'm pretty, relatively new into my coaching career. We'll see how long it lasts.
We're pretty rural out here, which has kind of helped with that. I mean, on the entire eastern shore of Maryland, we're a peninsula out here. We call it Delmarva, which is short term for Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, because the Eastern Shore of Virginia, Eastern Shore of Maryland, and Delaware are all meet right here. And we only have 11 football playing high schools in a like 7-county region. So there's not really a whole lot of places to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like some places like, kind of up where you are in Northern Virginia, where there's all sorts of schools to move around, or in other big areas. We're pretty rural here. But yeah, I definitely understand how fortunate I am. And it's really helped me because I'm so familiar with the program that I know what we need to do, and I'm ready to make it happen quickly.
Yeah. And that's probably going to give you an advantage that you've been there for so long, that
Mm-hmm.
you know the area, you know the types of kids you're going to have at that school, definitely the administration. I hope you know the administration, that helps. So as I understand it, and you've said it before, you are a new head coach.
Yep.
And this is a very interesting time to become a new coach and get a new job in period. So can you kind of describe for us, what has it been like to become a new head coach in this time of this COVID pandemic?
In a word, complicated. And we're still dealing with that complications. The end of that is not in my sight anytime soon. I got the job in December of last year, and everything was normal, and we started doing our regular off-season thing. We were having good numbers in the weight room. We started doing some classroom stuff. We were having good turnout. And then, I think it was March 13th was our last day of school. And we were, essentially no contact, incommunicado. We did set up a Google Classroom where we could contact and still try and get them information and things like that. But that was different. And even during the summer, there was a 3-week span where we actually were able to do, social distancing, strength and conditioning, as I called it, where we're able to do something, but then they put a kibosh on that. And now we're back to that same point where everything we're doing is digital. We had a meeting yesterday. We're going to have a quote unquote digital season where we're going to meet with them 3 to 5 days a week, do some academic check-ins, some leadership stuff, do some X's and O's stuff, but it's all going to be virtual install. So it has been difficult in that regard. And, we're supposed to play in February. I don't hold my breath on that. We're kind of following your guys' model with there in Virginia. Hopefully that's the case. I'm super excited to look forward to it. But, at the same time, like I just told you, I wouldn't bet on it necessarily. But at the same time, it has actually put a lot of things in perspective, and it's kind of forced, myself and the entire coaching staff to have the time and take the time to rethink what we do, how we do it, and more importantly, why we do it.
Mm-hmm.
We're right now, it's Wednesday. We should be playing game 1 in 2 days. I was still talking to my offensive coordinator this morning about better ways to install stuff. And I think that's a huge part of this is, there's a lot of anxiety out there as far as what's going on with COVID. Actually, the episode I recorded today on my podcast is, I'm a big believer in process-based thinking versus outcome-based thinking. And if you ever want to burn an hour of your life, ask me to answer that question in detail. But basically, instead of worrying about what's going to happen, we're just going to worry about what is happening right now. We're going to focus on development, teaching, and growing versus necessarily, what's going to happen in February. I have no idea what's going to happen in February, but I know that we can be the best coaches that we can be today and develop our players the best we can today, making them better in the long run. And this whole pandemic has really kind of put that in focus for me, because it really does reaffirm the idea that focusing on development and the processes that you use and building your people and building your organization is how you establish long-term success. And I've been there as a coach where you're trying to chase that win. You're trying to go get that victory. You're trying to be, the team that scores the most points, and all those things are great, but all those things don't establish long-term success. They're momentary success. It's, hey, cool, we won this game. Awesome. Now let's get ready for next week. Whereas with the process-based, even if you lose the game, it's like, we're going to learn something. And I think that's really been reaffirmed by what's going on. So it's kind of been a weird double-sided coin. On one hand, it has been complicated. It's been a giant pain in the butt. It's been very frustrating at times. It's been very discouraging at times. But like I said, at the same time, it's forced us to really reassess what we do and make sure that when we do hit the field in February, that we're going to be as efficient as possible, and we're going to be the best teachers of the game possible, because we figured out all of our processes at the time. Not to mention, we talk about culture and leadership and how we want to teach our guys that stuff, but inevitably, right, we get into the season and we get caught up in, hey, we need 20 more minutes on team O. We need 15 more minutes to work on inside run, whatever it might be. And all of a sudden you get to that time, you're supposed to be doing that leadership stuff, that character building stuff. It's like, all right, we got to hurry up and get through this because we got something else to do. I don't have that pressure right now. We don't have to worry about that. So we can take the time and we can establish that culture. We can establish those leadership programs, establish those character building programs, because there's no pressure to get done. There's nobody saying, hey, you got to be on to the next thing, because there is no next thing right now. Mm-hmm. So we're focusing on what we got to do. And that's been actually a benefit of this whole thing, in my opinion.
All right. Well, thanks for that answer. And I know that the next question I actually wrote down on the sheet had what offense and defense you run, but I kind of want to skip to the question after that, since we're already kind of on culture and all that kind of stuff. And we'll come back to offense, defense stuff, because I know the coaches always want to hear about that.
X's and O's, man. That's what everybody wants.
Heck yeah, man. I like we talked about, you were on the Navy podcast the other night, and we kind of talked about it, and I caught myself drawing up plays again this morning. So X's and O's, it always gets us. Mm-hmm. But we're going to keep going with the culture thing. Can you describe, you might have already kind of talked about this a little bit, but can you describe your coaching philosophies? Woof. Got to take another drink here in a minute. Your coaching philosophies and leadership styles. And more importantly, where do you think these came from? Did you get these from another coach? Did you learn them along the way? So where did those styles come from for you?
I have stolen everything I do from somebody who knew better than me. I that is upfront and as honest as I can be. I kind of already touched on my coaching style, my philosophy style, but especially now as a head coach, we were doing that strength and conditioning this summer, and I was not on the field directly coaching anybody. And that was weird for me, because I've been doing it, on top of doing offensive coordinator stuff. I was kind of the de facto strength and conditioning coach for our program as well. I do a lot of, I competed in strongman for a few years. So I've done a lot of that higher level strength and conditioning type stuff. So, I was always working with that. And, I looked at our athletic trainer and I said, this is kind of strange. I said, I'm not coaching right now, but I realized I shouldn't be coaching right now. I'm a firm believer in delegation. I'm a firm believer that you hire good people, and if you hire good people, just get out of their way and let them do their job. I mean, you give them direction, you give them purpose, you give them vision, but it's okay to allow them to use their talents to maximize what they do. And the same goes for our players. This is going to probably hurt some feelings and ruffle some feathers, but as football coaches, we got to chill out, man. We want to control everything, and it's just not, one, it burns you out. Two, in 2020 and the 21st century athletes, it's not practical. Three, I don't think it's really even the best strategy anymore. We've got so many talented athletes out there, and they're only getting more and more talented. So my job as a coach should not be to tell them what to do. It's to give them the idea of, here's what we want to execute, and let them use their talents to make that play. We'll teach up technique, we'll coach up effort, we'll coach up ability. But at the end of the day, the less we tell them, the faster they can play, because the less they have to think about, if that makes sense. It doesn't mean our schemes are simple. Our schemes are complex, but they don't need to know everything. They don't need to know the complexities of it. Let the coaches handle that. I'm a firm believer that when you teach somebody, and this is whether it's in the classroom, whatever it might be, it's not about my capacity as a teacher. It's about your capacity as a student to learn. And I think sometimes we forget that as coaches because we want them to know all this stuff, and I stand guilty as charged. I've done it countless times. Hey, we need to be able to run this play, and the next thing you know, you've got 62 plays that they need to know. And let's be honest, how many of those plays do you call on a Friday night? Not that many. You're probably looking at, 15 plays that you call regularly. So why do we spend all that time dedicated on that stuff? Again, kind of back to what I answered the last question, process versus outcome. What makes our players the best player they can be? And then let's do that and get the hell out of the way. Let them use their talents. We will provide them with the information they need, but we can't joystick them. That's a concept I picked up a few years ago. We're talking primarily about American soccer and American youth soccer. But we have this real big problem where we joystick, right? We tell the player, hey, run there, go there, do that, do this, right? Like we're playing a video game with the joystick. But if you watch like European youth soccer, the coaches hardly say anything. European rugby, the head coach sits up in the booth. Can you imagine a head coach of a high school football team sitting up in the booth? But they just let their players play. They teach them and they prepare them during the week. And when it gets to game time, hey, hands off. You guys know what to do. You're prepared. And that's kind of my philosophy as a coach. Let people maximize their talents. I'll provide the vision. I'll provide, the information and, I'll provide the camaraderie and the culture, but I'm going to let you guys use your talents to the best of your ability. And where does that come from? Fortunately, a lot of great people. And like I said early on, a lot of people who probably were poor leaders. One of my favorite quotes, the Duke of Wellington, I'm a huge nerd, by the way, huge history nerd. The Duke of Wellington, not going to get into his bio, but he beats the crap out of Napoleon at Waterloo, right? Everybody knows that one. Later becomes Prime Minister of Great Britain. His very first military campaign, he gets his butt kicked, just gets absolutely whipped. And he comes back and he says, well, at least I learned what not to do. And that is always worth something. And I'm like, absolutely, learn from other people. But growing up around military leaders, growing up having great coaches to learn from, there's a lot of great people out there on the internet now that have a lot of great things to say about leadership. Just listening to what they're saying. USA Football actually has some tremendous people there who kind of think outside the box and are really helping build philosophies like mine. So, I could go on and on, but that's just a very long-winded way to answer that question.
Hey, I get it. I've been doing a lot of research, but I was a freshman head coach my second year ever coaching, which, I thought I knew everything, but that season definitely taught me that I didn't know everything. Mm-hmm. So after that season, I had been force-fed down the throat just from that season. I tried to teach my kids too much. Like I tried to change offenses in the middle of the season. We tried to run too many plays, and eventually what happened was we're like, well, crap, these kids can't remember the plays. So let's pare it down to what they can remember. And we ended up with 3 run plays and 1 or 2 passing plays. And we practiced it over and over and over again. In the last couple of games, we still lost, but we were definitely way more competitive.
You're better.
Than we had been at the beginning. And so that really made me a huge believer in the KISS philosophy, the keep it simple, stupid. Mm-hmm. There is such a thing as doing too much, especially on offense and defense. My first year at the current school that I'm at, the head coach is the defensive coordinator. This is my first year ever coaching real defense. I was a linebackers coach. I think at the end of the season, we had 8 or 9 different coverages, different coverage packages, not including all the blitz packages that our kids had to know, right, in a 33 stack defense. And we had blitz packages out the wazoo, and then each kid had to understand, well, what do I have to do on this blitz package with this coverage? And it just but the thing is, we only really ran 2 or 3 coverages each game. We might have 1 or 2 that we put in for one game here or there, but we would practice all of them the whole week. And I kept saying, and our coach was like, well, why aren't we as good at this coverage, cover 3, as we should be, because that was our main coverage. And I was like, well, because we spend maybe 10% of practice on that, and we run it 90% of the game, and uh, trying not to be mean to our head coach. He's a great head coach, but sometimes he and I argue because he's not necessarily a KISS philosophy person. He definitely prescribes to the belief that, well, we need to be complex, because if we're more complex and we're able to do it, we're going to confuse the other team. And it's like, I don't know about that. But
I'm a firm believer you can give the perception of complex, but still be simplistic in your assignments. And that's kind of what we're striving to do. It's kind of funny you say that about being a freshman head coach. I have the exact same story. My second year coaching, right? The first year I was JVD coordinator. My second year I become JV head coach, and we don't have freshman ball. We only have varsity and JV. And we won our first game. We beat our crosstown rival. I had a running back go for, 5 carries, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. I'm like, man, I know what I'm doing. I'm good at this. The next day he was up on varsity, and we proceeded to win 1 game the rest of the whole JV season, because I was doing the same thing you were doing, right? I am not kidding you. When that season we had shotgun spread, we had pro eye, we had power eye. I had double tight, double wing with the silly superpower play. Yeah, I'll say it's silly. I know someone's going to get irritated by that.
It works, though.
But it does. No, it does. Given the right circumstances, it can be tremendous. And same thing. And we were awful. Our losses weren't even close. I mean, we were routinely getting blown out. And I'm like, man, like, what are we doing? And kind of carried that into the second year. And then something clicked eventually. And I was like, hold on. When I don't even talk about the other team and I say, hey, we're just going to practice this all week, we're actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. When I get caught up in trying to match up with the other team, we struggle. I'm like, so let's just focus on us. And after that, we had a lot of success on the JV level moving forward. And it was just that simple switch of, instead of worrying about winning the game each week, let's worry about just getting better, and tremendous difference in improvement.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Well, now I think we can talk about offense and defense. So, as much as you want to, because I know you're the head coach and you don't want to give anything away to anybody who might be listening to this.
Listen, I'll send them I'll send them our playbook. We just got to out execute them anyway.
All right. So, what offense and defenses schemes do you use, and why?
So this is a huge thing for us. So, having been the offensive coordinator, I've been a gap scheme guy my entire life. In high school, I played in a power I, a pro I, a single wing, and a wing T team. So, like, I was born and raised a gap scheme boy. As an offensive play caller, everything we've done has been gap scheme. It's been spread and pro I, and a couple other things, but it's always been gap scheme based. Not anymore. The first thing I did when I got hired as a head coach is I fired myself as offensive coordinator, simply because I didn't have in my opinion, I think it's difficult to do both. I think it just takes away from one or the other, and you're never 100% committed to either job. 2, I was an average play caller at best. I was really good when I had really good players. That was about it. So we're new offensive coordinator, keeping our D coordinator, but we're totally changing our offensive scheme. We're going to more of a zone-based, for a variety of reasons. I think it helps our personnel the best. We also don't have a feeder program. So when we get kids as freshmen, it's, we don't know what level of experience they have. So we can't go down to our Pop Warner teams and say, hey, we want you to run this, so that when they get to us, they know what they're doing. So we said, what's the simplest thing to teach? And I really do believe it's zone blocking. Now, the execution of it is a different story, but I think if you can teach them to count to 3 and take the proper zone steps, you're 3/4 of the way to being successful. Now you lose, there's a lot more to it than that, but at least as far as the basics, we didn't have to spend hours teaching. Offensively, and then defensively, we've been a 3-3 stack team the past 3 years. Before that, we were a 4-4, split 4-4 team, all that stuff. We're going to a 4-2-5 look, which I know is kind of the all the rage right now, but that's not obviously why we're going to it. Again, I think it helps our personnel. It gives us a lot more flexibility in our scheme so that we can do the things that we talked about. We can be complex in perception, but simple in assignment, and allow our guys to just kind of make plays. It also allows us to be flexible. In our league, if my schedule had worked out as normal, my first week I would have seen air raid. My second week I would have seen wing T, true wing T. My third week I would have seen spread run. Fourth week would have been pro I. Fifth week would have been wing T again. And sixth week would have been double tight wishbone. So we need to be flexible, and we need to be able to adapt our defense. And we really feel like the 4-2-5 with a cover 2 behind it, doing some read 2, some palm stuff, will really help us be flexible so that we can adapt to what we're seeing every week, as opposed to kind of being married to certain alignments or certain schemes. And we're fortunate. We've been able to get with some great coaches. The coaching staff at Bridgewater has been tremendous out there in Virginia. They'll answer any question we ask, and it's been great. So learning a lot from them about those types of schemes and the way they do things. And same thing with Shenandoah, they've been great as well. So we've really been fortunate to get a ton of great information about it. And, and we've been ready to go, but now we've got that extra time of, our COVID season. So we really can hammer down what we're going to do. And when that first day of practice hits, we won't have to think about, well, what do we want to install? We're just going to hit the ground running. And I think it's going to be successful for us.
Yeah, that all makes sense. My background is, I know a lot of my viewers and listeners, they'll probably know me as a wing T guy. And it's a little more complicated than that because, I ran a blog and it's called Obsessed with Offense, and I love all forms of offense.
Sure.
And, it's my belief that scheme is irrelevant, as when it compared to culture and philosophy and stuff like that. Because if you don't have a good culture and all that stuff as your base, your scheme's probably not going to be very good. Doesn't matter what you run. 100%. And you're going to get somewhere out there in the United States this year. There's going to be somebody running the wing T who's going to win a championship. There's going to be someone running the air raid who will win a championship. And there's going to be a lot of teams running both of those offenses that really stink. So it's not always about like what your scheme is. I will say defensively, I know the 33 stack and I know the 4-2-5 because we run both fronts, and we run it in a system that where like it's basically the same thing. It's just we've traded a linebacker for a defensive lineman.
Sure.
For us. And so it's really flexible for us. And for me, 33 stack is if you get the right blitz packages and the right movements up front, you can basically make it whatever front you want. If you got the right blitz, you can make it a 4-2-5 look. And so that's a pretty good defense as well. But I thought you explained yours very well and your why. And to me, the only time I'm really critical of anyone about like why they choose a certain offense or a certain defense is, I run the spread because it's cool or, because I want to throw the ball. I was like, is that the only reason you did it? If that's the only reason you don't know your real why, then it's not a good idea. So
I think that goes for anything in coaching. I think you make a great point there. I'm a firm believer that anytime you do anything as a coach, whatever it is, whether it's the way you let your players dress, the way you run your practices, you got to have a solid reason why. And does it lead to overthinking sometimes? Absolutely. But I'm a firm believer, let me overthink as opposed to underthink, so that my guys don't have to think as much. Let me do the hard work there. And yeah, I think knowing the why you do anything it's the most important part of coaching.
All right. So here at the Armchair Coaching Podcast, we like to talk college football a lot.
I love it.
And so we're going to get a little bit broader picture than high school here with this question. I'm not a big political person. I really don't have any affiliations politically or anything like that. And hopefully, I'm sure you're pretty cool. You don't seem like too political of a person. Hopefully, but what are your thoughts on how the different college football conferences are handling the pandemic, especially like the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and that kind of stuff?
So I'm a huge Big Ten fan. Even though I lived all over, I spent a lot of time in that Midwest area. I lived in Wisconsin for 7 years, Indiana. I was born and graduated. Went to Purdue for a year. So I'm intimately familiar with Big Ten football, and I love Big Ten football. Um, the thing I would say about it is that each conference is certainly allowed to make their own decision and merit it however they want. And if they really think that was what's in the best interest of their student athletes and their colleges and their universities, then I'm okay with them saying, hey, we're not going to do this. The problem I have, it's not so much with the Pac-12, but maybe it's just because the Big Ten's been amplified, was just kind of the way everything went down and kind of the way everything was handled. It was just very poor communication, and it was a very startling lack of leadership. It's like they didn't want to tell anybody what was going on, and then they're still waffling. There's talk now, they might come back in October, and it's just like, if you're going to make a decision, I'm a firm believer, make a decision. Good or bad decision is better than no decision. And once you make a decision, write it out, adapt, and then move on from there. I think certainly regional play would have probably been something they could have pulled off, maybe not interregional, maybe not playing any other conference. And yeah, it would have been a limited season. And I think they would have been all right. Again, I'm not, privy to the information they have or the research they have and all that stuff. I mean, there's some pretty good research schools in the Big Ten. I would hope that they at least did their due diligence. But again, I have a bigger issue with how they handled it and how they just did not communicate very well with the coaches, with the players, and all the things like that. And I think it really took away from the decision they could have made. Again, they're entitled to make the decision they want to make. But I also think they should make decisions based upon the input of the people that are involved. And I don't know if that was necessarily the case either. I think there was some people, and maybe some of us in high school level can relate to this. Some people made decisions without getting any stakeholders involved, and I think that's always a bad time. You never want to unilaterally make decisions, but and then you see some of the other ones. They're just going to do their regional stuff. The AAC with that stuff. The ACC, the Big 12, the SEC. We'll see how they do with the safety measures and things like that, and we'll see what the numbers do across the country. But it looks like right now that they're going to be more successful than not successful. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. But at the end of the day, they can handle it as they see fit. I just really wish some better communication, some better input had happened in specifically the Big Ten.
Yeah, me too. And the whole, oh yeah, we're not going to have a season. We're going to push it to the spring. And then, oh wait, we might come back. And yeah, I hate that. And I just, I worry about the teams that are playing, because I mean, you like recently, I just read this morning, Auburn had like 11 players that weren't at practice when they restarted practice. And a couple weeks ago, it was Vanderbilt and it was Rutgers and all these teams who weren't able to practice. And I think right now, North Carolina State is having a huge issue whether or not they're even going to come back and play any sports at all. So, and it bothers me. It's like, without the Big Ten, the Pac-12, I mean, probably the Pac-12 would not have a college football playoff contender this year. I didn't really see anybody at all that would really stand out. But the Big Ten, they have Ohio State. Penn State could have made a run. I mean, Wisconsin could have made a run. Not Nebraska, but Michigan, maybe Michigan. Who knows? You had a couple teams who could have made a run.
Sure.
But they're no longer eligible for, the current plan, right? Even if they do come back in October, I don't even think the playoff committee is not going to wait for them.
No, I mean
So,
their season. If their season was 10 weeks long, their season would still be going on when they were coming out with the playoff standings. So it's
right.
yeah, and you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean obviously we are concerned for the teams that are practicing, that are playing. We don't want anything bad to happen to them. And you would hope that coaches are doing what's in the best interest of their players. Um, I don't know if some places that's happening. I know that the debacle at Florida State, I can't wrap my head around what's going on down there. I don't know if that's really what's happening, or if there's just some perception issues. I'm not sure, but either way, they're having some real COVID based issues without anybody even getting the disease. And I think that's a key part of this as well. Is that if you're going to have the season, you better make sure your systems are in place to take care of the players, because like the guys who are opting out. We saw today Jamie Newman, the Wake Forest quarterback transfer. He's now going to opt out to get ready for the draft. I don't blame those guys one bit. I get it. You've got potentially millions of dollars on the line. In a situation like this, why would you risk it? Why would you push it, especially if you're not confident in the safety measures in place? So, I totally understand what's going on. I would hope that if the colleges are playing, that they are truly doing the things they need to do, and not trying to pull one over on people just so they can win games, essentially.
Right. And kind of brings up to mind the other night when we were talking Navy, a couple of the guys, this is a spoiler alert if nobody listened to the Navy podcast yet. We kind of talked about how if a team like Navy in the AAC with their schedule and the type of kids they have, if they're able to run through their schedule unbeaten and pretty convincingly run through their schedule, would they be in consideration for a college football playoff? And so now that we've got the Big Ten out of the way, we got the Pac-12 out of the way, does that potentially open up things for some of those Group of Five conferences? I don't think we don't have Mountain West, we don't have the MAC. Those are canceled.
The MAC's canceled as well. Yeah.
MAC's canceled. So like a Sun Belt team, maybe App State comes out and just dominates. Um, maybe Memphis or SMU, they had good seasons last year. Maybe they continue their successful runs. Do you think this might open up something for one of those smaller schools that has not yet been considered? Or is it going to be one of those situations where we have 3 one-loss SEC teams in the playoff for the first time and Clemson?
The true believer in me wants to say that it gives those Group of Five schools an opportunity, but the realist in me says probably not. For that to happen, like you said early on in that statement, the Group of Five team has to win and win big every game. Has to be UCF a few years ago or something like that. So given that situation, right, if we were to see a team like that UCF team from a few years ago, I think they would have a shot this year. Mm-hmm. But I also think it would be an uphill battle, because you've got to beat the teams in your conference and you've got to beat them soundly. You can't have, in my opinion, any 1-2 point games, 1-score games. Like, they've got to all be double-digit wins, and so it would be very difficult unless you are just that much more talented than the rest of the conference. So does it give them a glimmer of hope? Is the door cracked open? Absolutely. The reality of it happening, though, I just don't see. It's a slim to none type of deal.
Yeah. It reminds me of, like you said, UCF, they never really were given a shot. They were never even got close to sniffing the top 4. And then for how many years Boise State?
Yep.
I mean, think about a team like Boise State going undefeated a couple years in a row and never even getting a sniff, and that was what this playoff thing was supposed to fix, right?
Right.
And yet those teams are still not getting the opportunities that they and I made the argument with my head coach one time. We were arguing about this, and he's saying, well, are you telling me that if Army went undefeated with their schedule, which is not the toughest of schedules, no offense to Army, but if they went undefeated and you had a 2-loss Alabama team whose only losses were to Auburn and LSU, would you pick Army or Alabama? And I'd say both. Make it like a 8-team playoff and give those undefeated teams a shot. If you go undefeated, I don't care who you are or what your schedule is, that's tough.
Yeah.
If you go undefeated, you should at least deserve a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's Army versus Alabama in the first round, they should at least be given a shot. The
Well,
fact that these teams aren't even given a shot
mm-hmm.
is ridiculous.
We saw Army Oklahoma last year. That was a nail biter, and that was an elite level team. So you never know what a team's going to roll out.
Yeah. So speaking of college teams, which college team or teams do you root for?
It's definitely teams with an S. Truth be told, I'll watch anybody play anybody. I love the beauty of the game of football. I find a weird art form to it, and the matchups and the chess pieces, and what coaches and the adjustments they make, and I just love everything about it. But if I were to pick some programs that I follow a little bit more closely, Purdue, a little homer there. Big Navy football fan. Navy's probably my number one, being, a Navy brat myself and living an hour and 15 minutes from the stadium. It's the closest college football I have. And just, I love everything about their culture and their camaraderie and the way they do things. I enjoy watching Clemson. I enjoy what they're about. I wouldn't call myself necessarily a Clemson fan, but I do appreciate their program and what Dabo Swinney has done down there. In Utah, University of Utah. I think Kyle Whittingham is arguably the most underrated coach in America. I think he continuously just does a great job out there. And because he plays in the Pac-12 and the Western Mountain Time Zone and nobody ever gets to watch him, I think people sorely miss out on a tremendous program. But yeah, I would say those are probably some of the teams I follow a little bit closer. And I've recently become a fan of Hawaii football. My wife and I went and got married in Hawaii, and the long-term goal is to retire to Hawaii and go coach football there. But I love everything about the Hawaiian culture and kind of the way they approach things. And so I've kind of become a half-bit fan of Hawaii football as well.
Hey, they need more fans. I've kind of always had a soft spot for Hawaii, just because it's Hawaii. I mean,
exactly.
And my stepfather one time told me, he's like, if you had the choice of the litter of any Division I college football program in the world, you would be an idiot not to go to Hawaii. I mean, you just go to school in Hawaii.
Yeah.
But if I remember correctly, I think a couple years ago, they were having like no luck at all on the football field, and they were even considering shutting down the program because of how bad they were.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so I think these last few years have probably helped them out.
Well, it's a huge expense there because every away game you've got to travel over 1,000 miles. Even if you're playing at San Diego State, which is I think their closest opponent, like you're still got to get on a plane. So it's a huge expense. But yeah, I mean they had those great years in the 2000s with June Jones and Timmy Chang. They were throwing the ball all over the field and everybody loved it. And then they got really bad. And then fortunately under Nick Rolovich, they've kind of come back a little bit now that he's gone. It'd be interesting to see, how they do moving forward. But, they definitely have a built-in fan base that will show up the minute they become successful.
Definitely. And last question for us tonight. Mm-hmm. Which coaches would you call an inspiration or someone that you look up to?
So I'm going to give you some college coaches. And I'm going to give you a high school coach. Kind of the coaches, the programs I've already talked about. I love Ken Niumatalolo at Navy. I really like what he does. And in the similar vein, Kyle Whittingham out in Utah. I think just underrated coaches who do more with less. Although Utah does have some studs, I don't think that they're guys that necessarily get the same attention as everyone else. And I think they do a lot with less. I know Dabo Swinney has kind of recently become a controversial figure, which kind of blows my mind, but it's because people don't understand, in my opinion, how Dabo thinks. At the end of the day, all Dabo cares about are his guys in that program. And, you can say what you want about him, but I think every one of his guys in that program knows that he cares about them in that program. And that's all that matters, right? As coaches, we worry about a lot of things outside of our program, but successful coaches really just focus in and get it done. And he's really done that. Say what you want about his comments about a variety of things. There's no doubt in my mind that his guys believe in him, they trust him, and they love him. And, that's what we should all aspire to be as football coaches is to build that level of relationship with our guys. So those are just some guys on the college level that I really like. And there's a ton more, don't get me wrong. But those are the guys that I kind of just sit up and pay attention to. And then I'll give you a high school coach. He runs a program out here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland that maybe, 2,000 people in this world have ever heard about. It's North Carolina High School in Denton, Maryland. I think they're actually in Ridgely, Maryland, which is even more obscure. But they haven't lost a conference game in, I think they're going on 4 or 5 years now. They're routinely one of the top teams in the state in the 2A, and it is a school in the middle of nowhere. Our area out here doesn't produce a ton of D1 guys, and they've produced 3 D1 guys in the last 3 years. One's about to be the starting running back at Boston College. One is about to be the starting D tackle at Notre Dame, and one's going down to Wake Forest to play D end. He just graduated last year. So, Coach McCormick does a tremendous job of, coaching his team up. And, we always say, I hate playing North Carolina because I know they're going to whip our ass, but we're going to really appreciate it when they're done. It's very rarely that a team beats the crap out of you. Hey, thanks for that. We really appreciated that opportunity to get dominated, but they're so nice and they're so genuine and they're so polite and they're such class acts that it's hard not to look at them and say, that's what I want to be, universally respected. I don't know hardly anybody who would say a bad word about him. And it's just, he's a great guy. So, that's kind of the guy I look to immediately on the high school level. And then, those college coaches that I mentioned as well.
All right. Well, I really appreciate that. And so before we sign off tonight, I'm going to give you a chance to, talk about any final thoughts that you have, especially since a lot of coaches are going through a lot of stuff right now. I mean, here in Virginia, you guys in Maryland don't even have a season right now. We're just watching from the sidelines, really. Do you have any final thoughts, any kind of like positive thoughts to go out to those coaches?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds trite and cliche, but I firmly do believe that adversity reveals greatness. We've got an opportunity here to really educate our guys, not just on the X's and O's of football. That's what we do all the time, right? We've really got the time to invest in them emotionally, to invest in them and build the relationships that we always talk about, but sometimes fall by the wayside, as I mentioned earlier. Really take this time. We know better things are going to happen, right? I'm not going to beat the dead horse anymore, but process-based thinkers, right? We realize that adversity and success both need to be taken with a grain of salt. It'll never be as bad as you think it is, and it's going to get better. And it's never going to be as good as you think it is. There's going to be times it gets worse. So when you understand that, you can say, hey, I don't know what the next 4, 6, 8 months is going to hold, but I know eventually we'll be back on that field. I know eventually we'll be strapping the pads on, we'll be getting out there, and we'll be under those Friday night lights eventually. There's no doubt in my mind about that, but I can't worry about that right now. Spend the time with your guys, get to know them more personally than you already do. Work with them on things like character development. I firmly believe that the number one job of high school athletics is not to win championships. It's to build championship individuals. All you got to do is get on Facebook right now, and you can see there's a lot of less than stellar people out there with some pretty poor character traits. And I kind of use that as my rallying cry. Like, hey, I don't want my guys to be that. I want my guys to be the guys that say, you know what, I'm not even going to engage with you because I'm busy focused on the positives. I'm busy working on me and taking care of my family and being the best father, the best brother, the best son, the best, husband, whatever it is that they can be. And I have that time now. So you better believe we're going to pour into them. And also use that time to analyze what you do on the field, analyze how you practice, analyze your drills. I think that's a big one. I was talking to a coach from USA Football about this the other day. Football coaches are so tribal, right? And we pass down our knowledge almost like we're speaking to the old chieftain, right? Oh, I did this when I was your age. You need to do this now. Why, man? And it's not disrespectful, but why? Is it really going to make my guys better? If not, throw it out the window, find something better. It's okay if the old coach did that 15 years ago. You need to do things that work best for you. So reassess what you do. look at your practices and make sure that at the end of the day, you're maximizing your players' talents, because that's our number one job as X's and O's coaches, is to maximize what our guys can do on the field, not what we can do. I know I'm smart. I know the scheme because I helped write it. So I don't need to prove my intelligence, but I need to help these guys prove their ability, especially if they want to get looks for colleges. And, if my systems aren't in place to help them maximize their talents, I'm actually hurting their prospects of being recruited. And that's unconscionable to me, so take this time. We know things are going to get better. I know we're going to be playing football again. I know I'm going to be on the sideline yucking it up in my Hawaiian shirts. Like, I know that's going to happen. So let's do what we can in the interim to make sure that when that does happen, we're making the best of it as possible. And when it does happen, cherish it for what it's worth and value it for what it's worth, because you don't know when it's going to be taken away from you again.
Yeah, and those are sage words of advice, and I completely agree with everything you just said. So what we're going to do, we're going to wrap it up here, coaches and listeners, and thank you very much, Coach Mills, for coming on and being our very first one-on-one interview here on the Armchair Coaching Podcast.
I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been a great conversation. I know I'm a hair long-winded sometimes, so I appreciate you being patient with me on some of my answers. But yeah, it's been great. I think this is a great thing you're doing, both with the program previews, because I think there's a lot to be learned from there, and it's fun. And as you get more one-on-ones, I think it's going to be great for anybody who's listening.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And listeners, this has been the Armchair Coaching Podcast. Please look forward to new episodes coming out typically every Tuesday and Friday. Every once in a while, we might introduce an extra episode here and there each week, but look out for Tuesdays and Friday mornings, especially Friday mornings for those of you who have long bus rides and you need something to listen to. This would be a great choice for you. So thank you, listeners, and stay tuned for new episodes.